Day 637 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take that simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than, a bit of a milestone, 320,000 military personnel losses, making for an additional 820 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, so 7 tanks, 14 APVs, and in my mind, not an overwhelming amount of artillery, which ended on 17 in the past 24 hours cycle. But try not to blame Ukraine too much about this low artillery figure. After all, Russia does have a good number of weak spots in its readiness rates and logistical capabilities, as it very inefficiently seeks to exhaust its own artillery system stockpiles, and in many instances, it has to slowly send it by rail from central and eastern Russia. In other words, it's not always going to be a target-rich environment for Ukrainian weapons platforms to work with. Then we'll head across to the map and start out generally in Ukraine today, where Ukrainian air defenses shot down 14 out of 14 drones overnight. Additionally, a Kh-22 missile failed to reach its target, crashing mostly in an open area in the Zaporizhia Oblast, resulting in some small damage to some private homes. Or, as Russia would probably choose to call it, a successful strike on a Ukrainian military base. And yes, that is a joking remark, but is it really? Because the Russian strike team always seems to report distorted information back all the way up the chain of military command, where the Russian MOD then typically proceeds to report so much of this erroneous information so that one level up from them, which is Putin, will be sufficiently pleased. Then we'll head across into the Donbass today. We'll start out in Bakhmut. So, as there's actually rarely a quiet day for this region still. And something of note recently was from the Ukrainian Asgard unit at work near Bakhmut, destroying multiple pieces of equipment, and among them a Strela 10 short-range air defense system. Then, just a bit further south from Bakhmut, Ukrainian forces repelled a large assault just south of Andrivka, destroying several large infantry groups of the Russian forces. And this still happens somewhat often. That is to say, Russian infantry assaults that are light on vehicles in this instance. And that's not even the hardest part for them, as typically, quite well reported actually, these Russian assault groups are low on air support and artillery support, and truly, more often than not these days. Then we move down across to Avdiivka, where it's truly some dirty work at the moment. As you can see with this footage, it's a US-provided M777 artillery piece working in the muddy Rasputitsa conditions of the region. And well, the US supplied about 150 of these to Ukraine, although Canada sent 4 and Down Under sent 6. But on the balance of probabilities, yeah, it probably was US supplied. And as for this region, no actual changes on the map in the last 24 hours, or longer for that matter, but fighting is still ongoing, and particularly in the northern flank. So, for instance, at the coke plant, which is around here, but also some suspect Russian sources continue to claim that Ukrainian forces have largely withdrawn from Steptova, although this still has not been observed with any visual confirmations. But it wouldn't be the first time that Russia has made some inaccurate claims, and so perhaps it's just a morale boosting effort for the Russian forces. In fact, somewhere in this oblast, there were some more traditional morale boosting efforts for the Russian forces, with a video released of an accumulation of Russian forces watching a band play indoors, which pretty quickly appeared to turn out to have the opposite effect on the attendees, so demoralizing more than anything. Now, I didn't have time to fact check the following tidbit, but apparently the vocalist's last words before the upheaval and the lights went out were, Everyone's jealous of us, referring to being jealous of Russians, of course. Then somewhere in the east, a 2S1 Vozdika self-propelled howitzer was completely destroyed in the Donetsk Oblast due to Ukrainian counter-battery fire. And do note, these SPGs with their track wheels are designed to move out of their former firing positions, right after shooting. But Russians use different tactics, I guess. And could you imagine if Ukraine lost as many artillery pieces as Russia? Because if Ukraine didn't have high survivability rates for their artillery pieces, then a case could be made for Ukraine having been overrun with Russian occupiers a long time ago. And the reality had turned out that Russia simply has bad aim. Atrocious, in fact. Whereas Ukraine, whose survivability depended on artillery accuracy due to their low artillery shell availability, their stockpiles, particularly in the earlier stages of this war, had thus forced them to exercise and refine good aim, high accuracy. Then we'll head across to another hot sector at the moment. So we are talking Kherson, so all the way to the west. As the AFU have said to be, well, have advanced on the left bank, so the south bank of the Dnipro River, a bit further there, as noted by the ISW think tank. And according to the best open source reports, Ukrainian Marines have advanced 2 infantry units, each comprising between 100 to 300 soldiers, into separate territories on the south bank of the Dnipro River. And there's also even some scattered accounts of a few light armoured vehicles and military four-wheel drives being transported across, along also with some light artillery and mortars. Then we also picked up this video footage of a Russian infantry. They were complaining about Ukrainian FPV drones targeting their vehicles on the M14 highway close to Krinky. Then also, so yesterday in this region from Russia, there were conflicting reports as the pro-Russian channel Romanov, with sources in the area, stated that Ukrainians are pulling into the area and that the Russian forces are performing some firing operations, but also state they have no idea what they're firing at. It could be anything at all. It could be nothing. Meanwhile, at the almost exact same time, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu stated that all Ukrainian attempts to conduct their amphibious operations in the Kherson direction led to colossal losses. So give that man another medal. Too much is never enough for this guy. Because another Russian channel on the ground stated it was difficult for their forces in this sector, specifying their lack of aerial reconnaissance, their lack of sufficient artillery fire support, also that the interactions between themselves and their neighboring units is practically non-existent, they said. So this is what my mate's girlfriend means when she says he doesn't communicate enough. Also, they go on to say that they're always watching their backs because the Ukrainian recon groups are walking everywhere. And so I did run out of time today, but in an upcoming video, I'm going to get into a bit of detailed strategy for Ukraine's basic needs and actions required to take the South Bank, and indeed, therefore, the rest of the Oblast. Then we'll head across to some news for today. Start out with some good hardware news, quite a bit really, more than I could actually mention. I'll do the highlights though. So the US has reportedly sent a single HIMARS to Ukraine. And the reports suggest that it's a bit special in the way that it's a modified launcher. So I'm thinking something small in diameter that fits right in there. And of course I refer to the GLSDB, the ground-launched small diameter blaster. That has a range of about 150 kilometers, which is approximately 93 miles, which provides a cost-effective long-range precision strike capability. So that's roughly a 60% longer range than the more traditional HIMARS, GIMLARS rockets that have been around for 15, 17 months now. So reports like these suggest that we're going to be in for a surprise upcoming quite soon, I'm sure. Then in some more hardware news, Germany pledged another aid package to Ukraine worth more than 1.3 billion euros, which impressively includes 4 more Iris-T air defense systems. Then move into some more generic hardware news. So, did somebody say baby drones? Because in this footage, we see one of the heavy-duty Ukrainian Baba Yaga agri drones releasing a small drone into the wild. Fascinating stuff, as this could really extend the range of the smaller but still very lethal FPV drones that take out heavy armor all the time now. Then we'll move across to some Russian hardware news. So it appears Russia is pulling out the old Soviet M55s from retirement for some much needed reconnaissance duties. Now, there were reports that the aircraft had been put into conservation way back in 2017, but realistically, only 5 of these were ever made, which makes me suspect Russia perhaps has been forced to cannibalize the parts of, say, 3 of them to get 2 of them up and running again in some sort of limited capacity. Then in a quick funny to round it all off today, guys, so remember a couple of months ago on September 12th, when a Russian airliner was devoid of maintenance with a failing hydraulic system, which forced it to land in a Siberian field? Well, it's still there, but this time with a fence. Perhaps to stop a bit of expected thievery, which reminds me of that one scene from the Lord of War film. I'll try to get a GIF up in post-production where a plane was left overnight somewhere, causing the locals to strip it clean. But going back to, as for this situation, make no mistake, this embarrassment happened as a direct result of sanctions due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Short and sweet, but thanks for hanging around. Really appreciate it. Continue to like, comment, and subscribe if not already. Particularly if you support the channel's wider message here, which is really one of sovereignty and how corruption leads to a failing society. So thanks again, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.